What's up? We're back. Corey Hughes, Bloody History. So, continuing on, right where we left off, testimony, Mr. Bernard Weissman. So, they're talking about a letter sent back and forth between Mr. Weissman and Larry Schmidt. And Representative Boggs says, let's first have a look at what he said. Weissman says, excuse me. Weissman says, paragraph 2 on the second page, Larry, as relates to the political goals of CUSA and the methods of achieving them, I, not alone, meaning Bill Burley, do not wholly support your ideas as concerning the NIC and related or affiliated organizations. It seems to us that this type of organization smacks of hypocrisy. I feel that any type of organization that we choose to support or begin to take support from should be free from racism and prejudice in general that is rampant among the high officers of the NIC. It should be obvious to you that once we associate ourselves with these people, we may acquire a personal reputation that can never be lived down. I'm sure you have considered this yourself because I remember we've had talked of it several times. Larry, let me remind you that my zeal is not slackened, but that I did not want to compromise myself or my ideals for the sake of accomplishing our goals a year ahead of time. I know, and you know, that we can do a fantastic job once we get together again with or without these organizations. What do you say about your name, though? About my name? Yes, changing your name. I didn't refer to it directly. In other words, in the letter I received from Larry, he said he mentioned that the NIC, the leadership, Frank McGee, was anti-Jewish, and it might be best if I changed my name in order to bring myself down to where I can associate with these people. At this point, Senator Cooper re-entered the hearing room. Do you have a copy of that letter? Let me take a look here. With your permission, I'd like to read into the record a paragraph. To what are you referring now, sir? This is a letter sent by Larry Schmidt to Larry Jones. And is it in longhand? Yes, it is. Do you recognize the handwriting? It is Larry's. It consists of 7 pages, which we will mark Commission's Exhibit 1036. The document referred to as marked Commission's Exhibit 1036 for identification. Before you read from the letter, how did you come into possession of the letter? Larry Jones gave it to me. Over in Germany? Over in Germany, yes, sir. And the envelope, which I now have in my hand, from which you extracted the letter, is postmarked Dallas, Texas, November 5th. What year? 1962. Is that the envelope in which the letter Commission's Exhibit 1036 was received by Mr. Jones? I notice the letter is addressed to Mr. Jones, SP4 Larry Jones. Yes, sir. We will mark that as Commission's Exhibit 1036A. That is the envelope. The document referred to is marked Commission's Exhibit 1036A for identification. Mr. Weissman says, on the 3rd page, last paragraph, he has marked one bad thing, though. Frank gives me the impression of being rather anti-Semitic. He's Catholic. Suggests Bernie convert to Christianity, and I mean it. Quote, we must all return to church. These people are religious bugs. Also no liberal talk whatsoever. None. Larry had a flair for the dramatic. Mr. Dulles then says, when he mentions these people, who does he mean? The NIC, and at this point I was ready to drop out of the organization completely, but thought better of it because I am a perennial optimist. I felt once I got down there, it was like changing your wife after you marry her. You figure everything will work out. Ford asks, this CUSA organization in Munich, did it have any local Munich affiliation at all? I mean, German affiliation? No, none whatsoever. Strictly an American proposition. All among GIs, with the exception of GIs or 1 or 2 hangers-on, American civilians over there. May I ask a question, Mr. Chairman? You stated at one point in your testimony that you did not care to become associated with some of these organizations you discussed. You named the John Birch. You thought it was too extreme. You stated earlier it was your intention to infiltrate these organizations. How do you explain this inconsistency? It's difficult to explain, the situation being as fluid as it was. You find that without anything solid to go on, you have got to change your stand a little bit in order to just get started. Let me ask you something else. You said that you had all thought that to be able to fully pursue your political objectives, you needed to have a certain financial independence. Is that correct? Yes. Did you intend to get some financial support from these organizations in addition to political support? No, not directly. We felt that after we'd accomplished our goal, this is assuming we would accomplish our goal, any treasury that they had through membership dues or whatever you would have would be a common treasury, a CUSA treasury. You had the idea that you could infiltrate and get control of these organizations. Then you would have a source of revenue through their treasury or whatever treasury you were able to build up. Yes. Did you think also in terms of contributions to these organizations from individuals? It had been discussed, never very completely. It had just been brought up, but we didn't know exactly what we were going to do, really. Was there any discussion about the support of these organizations, about financial support of these organizations, that they might be a source of funds? You mean from individuals who would contribute? Yes. Yes. Was there any discussion as to what individuals were supporting these organizations? Just those we had occasionally read about in Life or Look or Time, people like Hunt, H.L. Hunt. Of Dallas, Texas. Of Dallas, Texas, the oil man. In other words, people who are known to be conservative, sympathize with the conservative philosophy. And we didn't know at the time, in fact, I still don't know personally whether or not they do contribute. I just know it is said that they do, but whether they do or not, I have no idea. Representative Boggs, it's been established, I presume, who paid for this newspaper advertisement. Well, this is something else. I'm still not sure who paid for it. The newspaper advertisement is Commission's Exhibit 1031. Did you bring the money in to pay for it? Yes, I did. Do you know where you got it? I know where I got it, but I don't know where he got it from. I got it from Joe Grinnan, Grinnan. Joseph P. Grinnan, room 811, Wilson Building, Dallas, Texas, independent oil operator in Dallas. Jim, can you pull everything on Joseph P. Grinnan? Boggs asks, how did you happen to get it from him? Well, Joe was the volunteer coordinator for the John Birch Society. And how did he hand it to you, cash or check? In cash. How much was it? I believe a total of $1,462, I believe. We had 10 $100 bills one day and the balance the following day. And now, as far as I know, Joe didn't put any of this money up personally because I know it took him 2 days to collect it. Do you think you know where he got it from? I don't know. I really don't know. He didn't tell you where he got it from? No, he didn't. But you're convinced in your own mind that it wasn't his money. Yes, because he didn't seem to be too solvent. Did you solicit him for money? No, I didn't. Who did? I believe Larry did. I think the idea for the ad had originated with Larry and Joe. And Larry solicited the money. No, I don't think so. I think it was Joe who originally broached the subject. How'd you happen to end up with the money? This was an expression of confidence, you might say, that Joe Grinnan had in me. Did you write the copy? I helped. Who else? Larry. So Joe Grinnan gave you the money, and you and Larry wrote the copy. We wrote the copy before that. And then you paid for it. What was this committee? Are you the chairman of that committee? Well, this is an ad hoc committee. I think we finally thought of the name. As a matter of fact, we decided on it the same morning. I went down to place the original proof of the ad. What do you mean an ad hoc committee? Oh, it was formed strictly for the purpose of having a name to put in the paper. Did you have many of these ad hoc committees? This is the only one that I was involved in that I know of. Were there others? Not that I know of. Did you ever ask Joe where this money came from? No, Joe was pretty secretive. I frankly didn't want to know. I was interested, but not that interested. And I didn't, it would have been a breach of etiquette to start questioning him, it seemed. Have you ever heard of H.R. Bright, independent oil operator? No. You ever heard of Edgar Crissey, Crissey? No. Did you ever hear of Nelson Bunker Hunt? Yes, that's H.L. Hunt's son. I knew that he had gotten it from 3 or 4 different people because he told me he had to get 300 here and 400 there, but he did not say where. The he is Mr. Grinnan, right? Right. That's all, Chairman. Did you suggest this advertisement had been drafted before he collected the money? That was Alan Dulles who asked. Yes. And you used this advertisement as the basis for the collection of the money, or was it used for this purpose as far as you know? As far as I know, yes. At this point, Representative Boggs withdrew from the hearing room. May I see the ad for the moment? There are a few things I'd like to point out in this. Give me the exhibit number, please. It's exhibit number 1031. Tell us the genesis of the advertisement, the black border, the context, the text, the part which Mr. Grinnan played, you played, and Mr. Schmidt played in drafting it, how it came about, what you did in your own words, how the idea arose in the first place, and then just go forward. Well, after the Stevenson incident, it was felt that a demonstration would be entirely out of order because we didn't want anything to happen in the way of physical violence to President Kennedy when he came to Dallas. But we thought conservatives in Dallas, I was told, were a pretty downtrodden lot after that because they were being oppressed by the local liberals because of the Stevenson incident. We felt that we had something to build up the morale of the conservative element in Dallas, so we hit upon the idea of the ad. Would you please tell us who you mean? Me and Larry and Joe, and then all of us together. All right. And I took a copy of the ad to Dallas Morning News. Please, sir, we wanted the genesis from the beginning, how it came about, who participated in drafting it. About a week or so before placing the ad, Larry and I got together at his house. The ad was placed when? The first payment was made on the 19th or 20th of November. Was this after the announcement of the president's visit? Yes. You knew that the president was going to be in Dallas on November 22nd? Yes. A week before that? Right. We had started working on the ad. Larry and I got together and I said, what are we going to put in it? Because I didn't have the vaguest idea. And Larry brought out a list of questions, 50 questions that were made up for some conservative. I think it might be possibly have been one of Goldwater's aides had just listed 50 questions and chinks in our foreign policy, you might say, weak points. And we just picked some that we thought might apply to President Kennedy and his foreign policy. Because the 50 questions went back quite a ways, and all of the questions except for 2 I had a part in saying okay to. The 2 that I had no part in was, read them please, was the 11th question. Are those questions numbered? No, but I'll read it to you. It says, why has the foreign policy of the United States degenerated to the point that the CIA is arranging coups and having staunch anti-communist allies of the U.S. bloodily exterminated? This was handed in at the last minute by one of the contributors. He would not contribute. By whom? I have no idea, but he would not contribute the money. Was this one of the men who gave money to Grinnan? Yes, this is my understanding. And did Mr. Grinnan tell you this? Yes, he said this has to go in. He said that to you in the presence of whom? I believe Bill Burley was there and Larry Schmidt. Where was this? In Joe Grinnan's office. In Dallas? Yes. That is room 811 of the Wilson building? Yes, and I was against this particular question because I frankly agreed with the coup. But it is a question of having all or nothing. Another question that was put in here, I forget exactly when, which I wasn't in favor of, which we put in after the proof was submitted to Joe Grinnan for his approval, is why have you ordered or permitted your brother Bobby, the Attorney General, to go soft on communists, fellow travelers, and ultra-leftists in America while permitting him to criticize loyal Americans who criticize you, your administration, and your leadership? Now, this struck me as being a states' rights plea, and as far as our domestic policy goes, I'm a pretty liberal guy, so I didn't agree with that. Who suggested that question? I don't remember. I just remember that it came up. I didn't like it, but the fact was that it had to be in there. Let me pause for a second real quick. So let's just review what the fuck this guy, Weissman, Bernard Weissman, goes to, he gets drafted and he goes to the fucking army for 2 years, right? Who gets drafted for 2 years? Who? I don't know. I thought you had to go in for 4. Was he reservist first? Like Kerry Thornley, who got out early? Maybe, possibly. But this is how I look at it. This is just weird. What fucking person does this, really? I don't give a fuck what the political climate is. I mean, I would say the political climate today is even more extreme than it was back in the 60s. Way more. But you don't have people like this getting together to plot shit, right? And so, every single place you look when it comes to all these different organizations, John Birch or fucking Minutemen or whatever the fuck, there's always the hand and funding of intelligence in there on some level, right? And so this guy strikes me as intelligence all day long, okay? So, And the reason is because, not that he put in an application with CIA and then got hired and became a fucking officer. No, nothing like that. But it seems as though he got recruited sometime while he was in the military. He ends up in Germany, right? And this is, within short time after the war, within 15 years after the war, right? And so he's there in Germany. He's with a bunch of other guys. And they're all meeting at some bar, and they form some organization with the help of some outside person who's not in the fucking military, but whose father was stationed there, right? This sounds all weird, right? And that guy's name is conveniently left out of everything. And then he comes back to America, and all of a sudden they're forming they have this organization that they formed in Germany. Didn't incorporate anything in America. Didn't incorporate anything in Germany either. They just signed an agreement together. Then they decide they're going to infiltrate all these right-wing organizations here in America. Okay, and he used the word infiltrate, right? Didn't he? Yeah, straight up used the word infiltrate. And so then after that, and they place this ad with some money that he doesn't know where it comes from, which sounds weird in and of itself. It was a lot of money, $1,400, which is about $15,000 today. And so, and then when this one thing about the CIA comes up, he doesn't want to have this one thing put in there, but then the other guys he's working with make him put it in there, right? So then they put it in there. But he was against it because he agreed with the coup, right? I mean, this guy just reeks of a CIA asset of some sort. I swear to God, my fucking milkman works for the CIA. All right. I'd like to keep you on for that for a moment. Was it a suggestion that come from a contributor, or did it originate in your group? I really don't recall. Or Mr. Grinnin. I don't recall if it originated with Mr. Larry or Mr. Grinnin or with someone else. I really don't know. How old a man is Mr. Grinnin? I would say in his very early 30s. That suggestion, the last one, that didn't come from you, however. Which? The one you just read. Oh, no. Because of your own liberal domestic philosophy. Right. The only question in here that is entirely my own is the last one. And this is because I was pretty steamed up over the fiasco in Cuba and the lack of the follow-up by the administration. And it says, quote, "Why have you scrapped the Monroe Doctrine in favor of the spirit of Moscow?" I will stand by that question. As far as the copy at the top of the letter appearing before the questions, as far as I know, this was written by Larry Schmidt. He showed it to me. I said, "This is a little rough, but if we're going to get our money's worth out of the ad, I guess it has to be." "Mr. Chairman, may I stand over near the witness?" said Mr. Jenner. "Surely. Thank you. When you say the copy at the top of the ad, does that include the banner, 'Welcome Mr. Kennedy to Dallas'?" "Yes. And you are referring to all that portion of the ad, which is Commission Exhibit number 1031, down to the first question." "Yes, the idea of the black border was mine." "Yes, I was going to ask you that. Why did you suggest a black border?" "Well, I saw a proof of the ad, drew a mock-up. The advertising man at the newspaper drew up a mock-up, and it was sort of thing that you just turned the page and pass it by unless you had something to bring it out, and I suggested the black border. He put a 1/8 inch black border around. I said, try a little heavier one. He went a 1/4 inch black border, and I said, that looks okay. And we had the black border. I take it from your present statement that you worked with a copywriter or advertising composer at the Dallas Morning News. Yes, his name was Dick Houston. How many editions did this ad run for the $1,463? One edition. It came out on the evening edition on the 21st and the morning of the 22nd. Just one paper, one edition, one paper. That is only the Dallas Morning News. That's right. It was not in other Dallas papers? No. The Times Herald? No. We felt we didn't even go to the Times Herald. We felt they would not even print it because they are a very liberal paper, and we felt it would be a waste of time. We were convinced that the Morning News were conservative enough to print it, and they did. So the Dallas Morning News people were quite aware of the composition of the ad and worked with you in putting it in final shape. Yes, as a matter of fact. I had asked to show it to a Mr. Gray, who was the head of the advertising department, and they said, no, that wouldn't be necessary. They just have to submit it to a judge, something or other, a retired judge who was their legal advisor, and who would look at the ad to see if there was anything libelous in it, so to speak, or anything that the morning news could be sued for. And I assume they did this because they didn't let me know right away whether or not they could print it. When I came back that afternoon or the following morning, I don't recall which, and they said everything was okay, that it would go. When you spoke with the head of the advertising department, that is the advertising department of the news? Of the Dallas Morning News, yes, sir. Mr. Weissman, you have read 2 questions with which you disagreed. Yes, sir. You've read a question, which is the last in the advertisement, yes, of which you are the author, and you said it would stand by that particular one. 100% yes, sir. Now, are there any others which you had a measure of disagreement, or any other which you now would not wish to support, or, as you put it, stand back of? There was one other that I thought was being a little rough on the president, which I didn't particularly agree with 100%. Identify it, please. It was the question that read, why is Gus Hall, head of the U.S. Communist Party, praised almost every one of your policies and announced that the party will endorse and support your re-election in 1964? I personally thought that the selection of this particular question tended to put the president in a light where he is voluntarily accepting this support. In other words, sort of calling him a communist, which I felt he was not. And at the same time, though, I had a reservation about making a big furor over it because of the fact, if nothing else, if the president did read it, he might realize something, and he might just do something about it and forsaking the support, so I let it go at that. Dulles says, when you spoke then of selection from a list, was that list to which you referred before, which I believe you said came from the Birch Society? A list of 50 questions. No, as far as I know, it didn't come from the Birch Society. It was just some political material that Larry had collected rafts of, and he had books and folders. It was something he pulled out and said, maybe we can use this, and he went through the 50 questions. We were in a hurry, and this seemed to be the easiest way out as far as getting some text, some composition for the ad. So the final selection rested with Larry, Mr. Grinnan, and yourself, with the exception of this one contributor who insisted on one. Well, let's put it like this. I signed my name to the ad, but you might say the final selection rested with the contributors. I had to go along with them because if I said I won't go along with it or I won't sign my name, there would have been an ad anyway. The ad would have just been printed anyway. Larry would have put his name to it. Now, let me tell you this. It will be a very short story. Bill and I decided about a week after we got to Dallas that Larry was full of hooey and that we could not go along with this guy. What do you mean by that? Well, everything he's doing for himself, and if we happened to fit in, it was fine, and he was getting an awful lot of recognition and publicity. We felt that this guy got any stronger, he would be able to move us out or control us. So when the idea for the ad came up, I said, okay, I'll put my name to it, because I felt any recognition that came would be then in my favor. And if we took advantage of this, and because these organizations would have to back me personally as representing them, I could then denounce the anti-Semitism, the anti-Catholic, anti-Negro, and they would have to back me up, or else I would just tell the whole story about this thing. And I felt this was going to be my move to get back to the original philosophy of a completely democratic type of organization. And I had discussed, Bill and I might say, were a partnership unto ourselves. We had decided one way or the other. We were either going to get out of Dallas or run the thing ourselves because we didn't like the way it was going. Did Larry object to your being the one to sign the advertisement? No, in fact, Larry was sort of afraid to sign it because when he had come out and said he was part of the Stevenson demonstration, his life had been threatened, and he had all sorts of harassing phone calls and so on. And he wanted to avoid this, but if it was a question of printing an ad or not printing it, he would he would have signed it. But as far as any organization of that kind being responsible for this ad, it was not true. There was no organization that backed this ad. There were 4 or 5 of you that really promoted it and finally raised the money for it and put it in the newspaper. That's not quite accurate. You might say when you get right down to it in the final tale, the John Birch Society printed that ad, not CUSA. Tell us why now. Please expand on that. Well, in order to get anywhere in Dallas, at least in the area of conservative politics that we were in, you had to, you might say, cotton to the John Birch Society because they were a pretty strong group, and they still are down there. And who's the head of that society now? The Birch Society. Yes. I never met the fellow. They had a paid contributor. I don't recall his name offhand, but anyway. Were you in his offices? No, Joe Grinnan, as a matter of fact, is the only man in the hierarchy of the Birch Society in Dallas that I met. Larry was a member of the JBS, and Bill and I didn't like it, but we saw that he was out for himself as much as anything, and this was a way to help himself along the way, both politically and financially. And he convinced us of the method to his madness, but as I said, we wanted to move Larry out when we found he was more JBS than he was CUSA, and he was willing to go along with them completely and forget about the CUSA goals. Your allegiance was to CUSA. Right, in other words, I would have used the John Birch Society as a vehicle as planned, but I would never have gone up on a soapbox to support them. Who are the members of the American Fact-Finding Committee, if any? Well, the members would be myself, Bill Burley, Larry Schmidt, Joe Grinnan, just the people immediately involved. Okay, hang on a second. Let me point something else out right here. So now we have these guys forming another committee, right? So they had a whole bunch of committees that they would form just ad hoc, right, as they said, and now they have this thing, the American Fact-Finding Committee. Okay, what is this starting to remind you of, guys? It's starting to remind you of, like, a little bit of Fred Lee Chrisman with his fucking fake organizations that he made up when he was up in Washington. Right, all the dozens of the maybe even hundreds of different organizations, the fake church organizations that he was connected to, the real churches he was connected to also, who were connected to David Ferry, right? So this is ringing like that. I mean, how many of you have personally or know people who, despite their political beliefs, went out and formed 50 different organizations that did nothing, right? Who did this? Who does this? Nothing. This seems to me to be some sort of, I don't know. Some sort of weird operation. I just can't put my finger on what the fucking purpose is. But there was a lot of this going on in the 60s, right? And we've seen it a lot. Hell, the Fair Play for Cuba Committee was a CIA op. All right. So, well, the members would be myself, Bill Burley, Larry Schmidt, Joe Grinnan, just the people immediately involved. That was a name and solely a name. Solely a name. There was no such organization? None whatsoever. And you used it for convenience on this advertisement. That's right. As a matter of fact, when I went to the place to place the ad, I could not remember the name. I had it written down on a piece of paper. I had to refer to a piece of paper for the name. Had you ever used that name before? Never. Did your group ever use it thereafter? Not as far as I know. Have you now named all of the people who played any part in the best of your recollection in the idea for the publication of the actual drafting of the aid and its ultimate running in that edition of the Dallas Morning News? There's only one other individual that I could name. He was there at the reading of the final proof before the ad was printed. That was Joe Grinnan's brother, Robert P. Grinnan. Is he an older or younger brother? I believe he's an older brother. What business is he engaged in? Oil and real estate. Who took out the post office box 1792, Dallas 21, Texas, that appears under your name here on this advertisement? Bill, Larry, and I went to the post office together. I signed for the box. Do you recall the date? It was the same morning I originally went to get the ad laid out at the morning news. Had it been discontinued? The box? Yes, I received a communication from Larry. He said the box time had run out. They had extended it for 3 months after that, and then it was, as far as I know, it is non-existent now. May I ask the question, would you state now to this committee, the idea of printing this ad was conceived by you and Larry Jones. What is the other name? Larry Schmidt. Alone, and there was no stimulation from any outside group or organization. Do you state that under oath? There was stimulation. From whom? I assume from the Birch Society. In other words, I think the idea for the ad for the something to do on the occasion of President Kennedy's visit, I think the idea for the something to do came from the Birch Society. Whether Mr. Joe Grinnan or someone else, I don't know. Was it communicated as an idea to you? Larry communicated the idea to me. He said, what do you think? I said, why not? Which one of this group did the idea come to? I don't know. It didn't come to you? No, it didn't come to me personally, originally, no. What is the basis of your evidence saying that this was the Birch Society? How did you know that? Where did you get that from? Well, it came to a point where everything we were doing, we had to go talk to Joe, Big Brother, and it's just the way it worked out. This is Joe grinning. Yes, they were getting a grip on us, and Bill and I felt that we had to bust this grip somehow. Was he prominent in the Birch Society? Yes, he was known. Joe grinning? Yes, he was known as a coordinator. Representative Ford. This one question that was inserted at the insistence of one of the contributors, which reads as follows. Why has the foreign policy of the United States degenerated to the point the CIA is arranging coups and having staunch anti-communist allies of the U.S. bloodily exterminated? To what does that refer? Do you have any specific information? I know it specifically refers to the Vietnam thing with the overthrow of Diem and the subsequent murder of the Diem people. Was that said to you at the time? This was not said to me at the time, but I had mentioned it various times, and this was definitely, as far as I'm concerned, this was definitely the reason for placing that. As a matter of fact, this had occurred not too long after that, I believe. Who was it that insisted on the insertion of that? Well, Joe Grinnan handed me this piece of paper. It was written on a piece of scrap paper. I could hardly decipher it myself, and he said, this has to be in. Go back and have them change the ad. So I had to run back to the morning news with this other insertion. This is just the way it happened. Senator Cooper withdrew from the room. I understood that you made a down payment on the ad. That's right. And then went back and paid the rest in full. $1,000 the first day and $400 odd on the second day. Were both payments made before publication? Yes. Mr. Dulles called attention to the post office box number. Yes. That stimulates me to ask you this. Did you receive any responses to the advertisement? Oh, did I? Yes, sir. Now tell us about that. And also, before you start, do you have any of those responses? Not with me. All that I received, I have at home. And indicate to us the volume that you have at home. I have approximately 50 or 60 letters, about 1/3 of which were favorable and the rest 2/3 unfavorable. Favorable responses, all but one, came before they were postmarked. The envelopes were postmarked before the president was assassinated. And the threatening letters and the nasty letters came afterward. Did you receive any contributions? I still have a check to the American Fact-Finding Committee in the amount of $20. Since we never opened a bank account, I just sort of kept the check as a souvenir. There was one $2 contribution. Cash. Right, from a retired train engineer or something. And that is for the Wabash Railroad. Were those the only contributions? To my knowledge, yes, sir. At least that you know about anything. That is right. In all the letters I received the first time we went to the box, I only went to the box once. That was, I believe, this Sunday morning following the assassination, the 25th of November. About, yes, sir. Did anybody have the key to the box in addition to yourself? Up to that point, only I had the key. After that, I left Dallas on Wednesday, I believe. I misspoke. It was the 24th of November rather than the 25th. I left Dallas on the following Wednesday, and at that time, I didn't see Larry personally. He couldn't get to the apartment that Bill and I were staying at for some reason or another. And I left all the dishes and things that he had given us to use while we were there, and in one of these dishes, I left the key to the box. Since that time, communications I received from Larry, he was the tenor of the letters had changed. They're more favorable than unfavorable in the ensuing weeks and months. Of these letters, he sent me one that called me all sorts of names, a lot of anti-Semitic remarks, and he sent another, and he gave excerpts in one of his personal letters of letters that he received in support of the position of the ad. Dulles asks, do I understand that you got all the letters that came in up to Wednesday after the assassination and that your associates have the rest, or Larry, I presume, has the rest? I don't know who has the rest. I don't know if it's Larry or Joe. Larry had the key. Yes, I left him the key. I left him access to the key. I received the letters written during the 2 days following the assassination, the Friday afternoon and Saturday following the assassination, because I picked the mail up following Sunday morning. Having in mind all your testimony up to the moment, I would like to take you back to the telephone conversation that you had with Larry Schmidt, in which he made the reference to Stevenson, following which That is, this conversation. You eventually came to Dallas. Yes, sir. And this conversation, as I recall it, the telephone call was in the month of October 1963. Yes, it was the evening of the Stevenson demonstration. According to the letter, I think it was the 24th of October. At this point, Mr. Dulles withdrew from the hearing room. Now, one of the members of the commission is interested in having you repeat that conversation in full, to the best of your recollection. Since it is recollection, it is going to change somewhat in words, but in tenor it will be the same. Do your best. Larry called me on the telephone, and he was very excited, and he described what had transpired in Dallas. Tell us what he said. That is what we're interested in. He just said, and his part in it, if any. He said that he had helped organize this demonstration, and it went off beautifully. There was going to be national publicity. The newspapers were all over the place, and he'd given statements to the news media, to the television. He said he was on TV and radio and had given out statements, and that it seemed that he was going to be headed for, not trouble, but a good deal of difficulty, because it seems he was the only one that came out as one of the organizers of the demonstration who openly came out and said so and identified himself with the demonstration. Yes, sir. He said he had. What did he say? Something to the effect that he had a bunch of his people down there, the University of Dallas students. Did he identify them as students? I don't recall. I met the students several weeks later when I got to Dallas. The students he had employed? That had participated in the demonstration, yes. Did he describe what the demonstration was insofar as his part and his group's part in it was? Dulles re-enters the room. Well, just to the effect that they had picketed and carried signs and made some noises inside the auditorium. Not he and his group, but that the picketers had raised quite a hullabaloo inside the auditorium. Were they his picketers? I don't know. This he didn't specify. I had assumed. What impression did you get in that respect? Well, I'd assumed his picketers were part of it. At this point, Representative Ford withdrew from the hearing room. You're repeating, to the best of your recollection, that telephone conversation. The gist of the conversation, yes. As best as you're able to recall. That's right. I really can't swear to its 100% accuracy, but I'd say 75% accurate anyway. Have you now exhausted your recollection as to what was said in substance? In substance, yes. In the course of that conversation, yes. I take it he urged you to come to Dallas. He did. That this Stevenson incident had stimulated things to the point that CUSA, your members of CUSA, should come to Dallas and everything was ripe. He said we can pick up the ball and start running. Now, you and Mr. Burley then went to Dallas, did you? That's right. We left on the 2nd of November. And that would have been following the receipt of the letter on October 29th, which we have identified as Commission's Exhibit 1032. How did you get there? Drove in my car. Did Mr. Burley accompany you? Yes. Did you stop off anywhere on the way? We stopped at his mother's house in South Carolina for about 4 or 5 hours. And when you reached Dallas, did you find a room or what did you do? That night we stayed at Larry's house. We got there about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Where does he live? At that time, he was living at the Eden Rock Apartments in Dallas. Is he a married man? He was. I take it he was separated from his wife at that time? No. He has been divorced since. But he was living with his wife at the time. Yes, sir. By the way, is Mr. Burley a married man too? I spoke with him just the other day. His divorce will be final in about 6 weeks, he thinks. And he was married at the time. Yes, separated. Where was his wife living? In West Virginia, I believe. He had a family, did he not? Several children? 4 or 5. You stayed with him at the Eden Rock Apartments? That's right. That is with Mr. Schmidt, yes. And then you and Mr. Burley arranged a room somewhere, did you not? We rented an apartment. I think we stayed with Larry for 2 or 3 days, and then we rented an apartment in Dallas. Where was that? I don't recall the address offhand. All right, now approximately, where are we now as a matter of time in this period? This is that you rented the apartment about the middle of the first week after we arrived in Dallas, which should be approximately what date? Oh, about the 7th or so of November. What did you do thereafter in the way of furthering the business of CUSA? Well, we were thinking of buying a 4-plex, a 4-family apartment house. Where were you going to get the money? We could have gotten a loan, we hoped, with no down payment because of the fact we're GIs through FHA or VA, and we were counting on that. So we were looking around, and we'd also planned to take over a private club, manage a private club with an option to buy it. What club was that? It was the Ducarme Club, Ducharme Club. Was that in Dallas? Yes. Where'd you become acquainted with that business opportunity? Well, this had been broached by Larry. This was one of the big disappointments. We had been promised by Larry we wouldn't have any trouble making a living, that he's had jobs and everything set up for us. That's one of the reasons I chucked my job in New York. I figured we'd be able to survive down there. We got to the Ducarme Club after a day or two, and it was a miserable hole in the wall that you could not really do anything with, but we were still dickering with the owner on the potentials. What did his club purport to do? Oh, it was a private club. They sold liquor and beer over the bar to members. Entertainment. They had a dance floor and a jukebox. Who, do you recall the names of any of these people interested in the Ducarme Club? The owners. Yes. The only one I know of is Leon Ducarme, the owner. Did Jack Ruby or Jack Rubenstein have any interest in the club? No, not as far as I know. Did you ever meet Jack Ruby or Jack Rubenstein? Never. Did you ever become acquainted with the Carousel Club when you were in Dallas? I was never in it, and I still don't know where it is. You were never in it. You don't know where it is. Did you hear of it when you were there? Never. As a matter of fact, the entire 3.5 weeks or so that Bill and I were in Dallas, we didn't go to the movies at all. The only two clubs that I can recall that we went to were the Lavender Lounge. Where's that located? In Dallas. I don't recall what street it's on. Is it downtown? No, it's not downtown. It's about 2 blocks from our apartment, and it is about, I guess, a good 30-minute walk to downtown from there. And the only other club would be the Ducarme Club. Where was that located? Oh, that was on Haskell Avenue in Dallas. How far from the downtown area, if at all? Well, to make it convenient, you should take a bus. Otherwise, about a 20-minute walk from the Ducarme Club to the downtown area of Dallas. Yes, sir. And the reason we went to the Ducarme Club after the fact and we decided we were not going to take it was that was a place we could get credit for beer. Larry had a charge account there, and that was the extent of our association with that place. Now in the Lavender's Lounge, the reason we went in there is we were dickering with the owners of the Lavender Lounge. Name him. L.S. Brotherton. We wanted to lease a club that he had that was closed down called the Beachcomber in a suburb of Dallas. And we had been in there several times and had talked to him about leasing this. In other words, we were looking for something that would give us an income so we could operate a little bit. And that never worked out. And he wanted too much money and we didn't have it. In any of these negotiations that were carried on by you or your possible associates, was the name Jack Ruby ever mentioned as a possible interest in any of those groups? Never. Did you hear the name Jack Ruby or Rubenstein any time up to November 24th? No, never. Do you have any information or knowledge or any notion or feeling that Larry Schmidt or any of your associates knew of or had any association with Jack Ruby, or otherwise known as Jack Rubenstein? I think I can state pretty emphatically no. Were there any communications of any kind or character, written notes, telephone calls or otherwise that you know about or knew about then to or from Jack Ruby? Never. When did you first hear the name Jack Ruby? I think when he shot Oswald, sometime in the afternoon or morning. Since Bill and I had neither a radio or TV in the apartment, we were in the apartment all day. All day that Sunday? Yes. We had heard about it that night. That's the 24th of November. If that's when Oswald was shot. You first became aware of Oswald being shot the night or evening of the 24th? Yes. That Sunday? Yes. I don't recall exactly how. I think Larry telephoned us and told us that. This is the first time we have mentioned the name Oswald. Have you ever heard the name Lee Harvey Oswald prior to your going to Dallas? No. Did you hear the name Oswald at any time prior to November 22nd, 63? No. Was the name ever mentioned in your presence? No. I take it from what you've said you did not know a man by the name of Lee Harvey Oswald. No. When did you first hear the name? We were sitting in a bar right after President Kennedy's assassination. This was the 22nd of November, 63. Yes, it was Bill Burley, myself, and Larry. We were to meet Larry and Joe Grinnan at the Ducarme Club. For what meal? For luncheon. We were supposed to meet him at 12:30 or 1 o'clock. I forgot which, about 1 o'clock. And I had a 12:30 on the button, as a matter of fact. And I had an appointment to sell a carpet out in the Garland section of Texas. It was 2:30 appointment, and I was in a hurry to get to meet Larry and finish the lunch and whatever business they wanted to talk about. I didn't know, so I looked at my watch. I remember specifically that it was 12:30 because at the time Bill had been driving my car. He had quit the carpet company and was looking for another job. He had looked at a franchise arrangement for insecticides. He picked me up. He was waiting for me from 10 after 12 to 12:30. We got into the car. I'm a great news bug, so I turned the radio on and looking for a news station. And they had at the time, as I turned on the radio, the announcer said there's been a rumor that the president's been shot. So we didn't believe it. It was just a little too far out to believe. And after several minutes, it began to take on some substance about the president's sedan speeding away, somebody hearing shots and people laying on the ground. In other words, the way the reporters were covering it. I don't recall exactly what they said, and at this time they were going to do the Ducarmi Club through downtown Dallas. We were heading for the area about 2 blocks adjacent to the Houston Street Viaduct, and then we heard about the police pulling all sorts of people. Somebody said they saw somebody and gave a description, and the police were pulling people off the street and so forth. So Bill and I didn't want to get involved in this, so we took the roundabout route. We got lost for a while. Anyway, we finally wound up at the other side of Dallas, and we were at the Ducarmi Club. When you arrived there, was Mr. Schmidt there? He was waiting for me, but Joe Grinnan wasn't there. He had heard this thing and took off. I guess he wanted to hide or something. Why? Well, because the way it was right away, the announcers, even before it was ascertained that President Kennedy was dead or that he had really been shot, that it was a right-wing plot and so forth, and that he had every reason to be frightened. Why did he have every reason to be frightened? Because, let's face it, the public feeling would suddenly be very anti-right-wing, and no telling what would happen if a mob got together and discovered him. They would tear him apart. Bill and I were frightened to the point because I knew about the ad and I knew exactly what, at least I felt in my own mind, I knew what people would believe. They would read the ad and so forth and associate you with this thing somehow, one way or another. So we went to another bar. I don't remember the name of it. The Ducarmi Club was closed, by the way, that afternoon. When you reached the Ducarmi Club, it was closed, but did you find Schmidt there? Larry was waiting on the corner. He got in the car. We sat and talked for a few minutes. He went to another bar a few blocks away. We drank beer and watched television, and he had been in the bar, I guess, about an hour when it come over that this patrolman Tippett had been shot, and they trapped some guy in a movie theater, and maybe half an hour or an hour later, it came out this fellow's name was Lee Harvey Oswald. This is the first time I ever heard the name. What was said at that time? By us? Yes, when it was announced it was Lee Harvey Oswald, we were relieved. Anything said about it? I really don't recall. First, what was said was like, I hope he's not a member of the Walker group or something like that, that I hope he's not one of the Walker's boys. Because it's like a clique. It's like guilt by association from thereafter. So came over this guy was a Marxist. This was the same afternoon, I believe. It was found out this fellow was a Marxist, and then the announcers, they left right-wing for a little while and started going to the left, and I breathed a sigh of relief. After 4 hours in the bar, Bill and I went back to the apartment. Larry went to the Ducarmi Club. He was afraid to go home. I thought the Ducarmi Club was closed. It was open at the time. We drove by. It was open. Larry went in. We dropped him off there, and Bill and I went back to our apartment. We just waited. We knew we were going to get involved in this thing because of the ad, and we figured that if anybody at all in Dallas was on the ball, they know who we were and who and where we were. So we waited. Nothing happened. We waited until we left. We barely left that house. As a matter of fact, you remained in the house all that evening, did you? The apartment. I think, yes. Late that evening, Larry came home. This is Friday evening, the 22nd. Yes, I think Larry went home late that evening, and Bill and I met him there. You went to Larry's home? To Larry's apartment, yes, and I said what we're going to go do. And Larry said, well, he talked to Joe Grinnan, and Joe said, don't say anything, don't do anything, don't get any more involved than you have to, and lay low and keep out of it. It's going to be pretty bad. And it was thereafter a day or so later. What did you mean by that? It's going to get pretty bad. In other words, this is exactly the way it worked out, for example. You're now explaining what you mean by, and it was. Right, Stanley Marcus, who was a Dallas business financier. Neiman Marcus? Of the Neiman Marcus group, yes. And he was well known for, and hang on a second. Is this the guy, Stanley Marcus? This might be the guy that fucking Elizabeth Forsling Harris married. And if so, that's just another closed loop here. Very interesting. Of the Neiman Marcus group, yes, and he was a well-known and rather very rabid liberal. And sure enough, even though the following day it was then established that Oswald was a Marxist and so forth, and there was some question as to whether or not it was a communist plot, pros and cons, and Marcus put his 2 cents in the Dallas Times-Herald, and he starts blaming the right wing for the trouble, and I was told, I didn't see this. This was on the 23rd now. This was on the following day, yes, sir. And in other words, he and friends of his, I guess, did everything they could to solidify their position as always being in the right and throw the blame, even though Oswald is obviously a Marxist. They tried to transfer the blame to the right wing. They had us on the run, and they were going to keep it that way. How did this come to your attention? Oh, just by reading the newspapers, the Dallas Times-Herald and the Dallas Morning News. There was very little in the morning news about the right wing, and that was anti-right wing, and the Dallas Times-Herald was full of it. Would you please delineate what you mean by us who were on the run? I mean, any conservative in Dallas at that time was keeping quiet, including yourself and the other men you mentioned, including myself and everybody I was associated with, yes. And a day or so after that, I think it was Sunday or Monday, I had suggested to Larry, and I spoke to Grinnan on the phone that maybe I should call the FBI and give them the story on this ad. And he said, now look, if they want you, they'll find you. They know where you are probably. So if they want you, they will find you. So I waited. And several times I was going to make that phone call, and I did not. Then finally, we just ran out of money. You're probably a few days beyond the 23rd now. Right, I am. I'm going now. Everything was rather stable, static up until that Wednesday, the following Wednesday when I left Dallas. I want to complete your whole day of the 23rd before your move beyond that. Did you or Bill leave your apartment on the 23rd? Yes, we were over at Larry's house. I don't remember exactly the times. We had been to Larry's place several times. Were you in the Dallas downtown business district at any time on the 23rd? I don't think so. So no. As a matter of fact, I didn't get around to the business district until, we went to the outer edge of the downtown area to get to the post office to pick up the letters. That is right. On the 23rd, you went to the post office box and picked up the 60-odd letters that you have at home in New York. That's right. And then we went directly back to the apartment and opened these letters. All right, so we're now about 2/3 of the way through this thing, which leaves us the last section, about 17 pages for tomorrow, and we'll pick it up here and we'll wrap this thing up. And this is interesting. You know, the connections are minor to the assassination, but they're interesting nonetheless. And so we'll wrap it up tomorrow, and I'll let you know what I think about it and Mr. Weissman. So appreciate you tuning in, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.